Hello, and welcome to episode 1.3 of the Shared Practices podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Richard Lowe. I'm going to apologize up front for the intro and outro on this episode, and I'm going to blame my friend Christopher Merkley. Went to UNLV, graduated at the same time as I did, was supposed to be my co-host for this, and he's kind of backed out on me. After I submitted this previous episode last night to iTunes, I was about to go to bed. I got a text. He's like, "Hey man, I went to the hospital and I thought I had appendicitis. Turns out it's a kidney stone." And apparently, he collapsed on his floor doing dishes. Didn't want to go in. Finally went to the ER, and they all thought it was going to be appendicitis. Turns out he's having a little baby kidney stone. Apparently, I've learned since then that passing a kidney stone is like the male equivalent of childbirth in terms of pain and intensity. And it's hard to, accurately compare the two different experiences because most males don't experience childbirth. And yeah. So naturally, my co-residents and I were thinking of throwing a baby shower for him. We don't know the gender yet, but if any of you have name suggestions or encouragement, you can email chrismerkley15@yahoo.com and just lay it out. And if you want to leave an iTunes review and include like a kidney stone joke or experience or a name for Chris's kidney stone, we can totally read that on the air. If I'm a little sleep deprived, it's because 4:30 a.m. is when I finally got back and to bed. It's my daughter's birthday today, and you're welcome, Chris. Okay, back to the podcast. In season 1, we want to address these issues that new grads care about. And for me, the most important initial question that we're addressing is whether or not practice ownership is right for you in your personality, your style, your career, your objectives. It's not for everybody. That's totally fine. There's so many ways to do dentistry. You don't have to be a practice owner. How do I know if my personality type is going to get in the way of me being a successful practice owner, and if that's something I should compensate for, or if that's something that I really should steer away from practice ownership and just say, you know what? I don't want to deal with all of this headache, all of this extra work, all that extra stress. It's, even though the rewards might be that much higher, it's not worth it for me. And that's fine. But you got to know up front that that's the reason. Instead of saying something like, "Oh, yeah, eventually I want to be a practice owner, but not yet because this, and this," and you procrastinate and delay practice ownership unnecessarily. And there's a quote that Jason Wood, who's going to be our guest today, he's a dental attorney who all he specializes in is contracts for dentists that are doing purchases, acquisitions, associateships, partnerships all day long. And so he sees these huge junctions where dentists go one way or the other. They partner with this person or they don't. They sell their practice, they value it, they purchase their practice. One of the things he said in a previous episode with Alan Mead on the Dental Hacks podcast was he said, statistically, if someone stays an associate for 7 years or longer, they will likely never own a dental practice. So there's kind of a ticking time limit on this, that if you procrastinate this decision long enough, you're going to make the decision for yourself, because eventually you're going to feel like, you know what, that's just not for me. It's not worth it. And maybe that could have been for you if you had more knowledge, or if you had more skills, or the right opportunities. I posed a couple questions to Alan Mead's Brain Trust recently online, and I basically said, do you think it's worth it for my generation of students graduating with all this debt to still own a dental practice? And I asked them, on the flip side of that, how do you know if you shouldn't own your own practice? Who are the people that are not happy and not successful in practice ownership, and what do they share in common? And then I also asked, what's your favorite and your least favorite part of being an owner versus being an associate? So there were some awesome answers. I'm going to share some more of those answers tomorrow. And there was one answer that really stood out to me as kind of part of my main hypothesis of this season. And it was a dentist named James Heaton. I think I'm pronouncing that right, but we'll find out because I'm going to interview him soon. And he said, I think that buying the right practice can be the way you get out from underneath $300,000 to $500,000 in student debt. I set a goal to pay mine off as quickly as possible, and owning my practice is what allowed me to do that. So one of the things I love about today's interview with Jason Wood is that he kind of lays out the financial benefits of ownership and why being an owner, you can take home so much more than an associate producing the exact same amount of dentistry, the same chair time, the same number of patients, not doing anything different clinically, hours all the same, but your take home is so much different as an owner, and he explains why. And at the break, we're going to point out something else that should bother you about your current pair of loupes that you can be annoyed about every single day as you put them on and use them. So a little bit more of that and why you might want to switch to Q Optics. We've got with us today Jason Patrick Wood, who's an attorney who specializes in helping dentists with their business transactions. And a lot of you might know him from Dentaltown, from other podcasts. And something that's unique about Jason is his willingness to share his perspective, whether that's a blunt and honest perspective when it needs to be, and also a perspective of someone who's seen so many of these decisions made, both good and bad, by dentists on purchases and acquisitions and associateships and bringing people in. So I'm excited today to have you, Jason, and thank you for your time and your willingness to help out.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So one of the things that you've talked about before on other podcasts, and I actually just went back within the last 24 hours and listened to your interviews with Alan Mead on the Dental Hacks podcast and Howard, and I tried to get through Jonathan Van Horn. The problem was I kept stopping and taking notes, and it was taking me too long. So I've gotten like 3 hours of you in the last, if that sounds creepy, it is, in the last 24 hours, and there's just so much good information that you've put out there. So
you must like punishment.
I do. No, it's I'm a glutton for it. So the thing that I want you to share with us is something that I've seen in a lot of my classmates and in a lot of the people who are graduating this year that are the year behind me. I just graduated last year. It is this fear of practice ownership. And I think a lot of it stems from student loans. Some of it stems from corporate dentistry and the competition and pressures out there, saturated areas. Some of it stems from this lack of knowledge of how to run a business or how to run a practice. And some of it's clinical. You know, you're new. You don't want to jump into a practice quite yet if you're not even sure of your dentistry. But I wanted you to talk about what are the things that you see that are holding people back from owning a practice, either starting up or doing an acquisition, that shouldn't be holding them back. Things that are in their head or they've heard that aren't real or not as big of a concern as maybe they think it is.
Well, that's a great question. So, and unfortunately, we're not even gonna. I'm just gonna dive right into the controversial issues, I guess, because
awesome. That's great.
You know, some of it's fear.
Okay.
Some of it's ignorance. Some of it's being preyed upon by people that don't want you to own your own practice. There's just a ton of different issues that really create the perfect storm, especially when you take into account this fear of student loans and getting into more debt. And coupled with that is just not understanding that there's such thing as good debt versus bad debt.
Right. So let's dive into that. With student loans, I think there's kind of three parts to that worry people. And I'd say part one is being able to get more financing when you already have so many student loans. And do you think that is a real concern? Do you think banks will say, oh, no, you've already got $400,000 of student loans. There's no way we're going to lend you money for a practice?
And if you talk to the wrong banks, the answer is yes. You'll absolutely be told that.
Okay.
But if you are working with dental lenders that understand that student loans are actually good debt, they don't analyze it the same way as your local banks, as your non-dental lenders, because what they do is they view that as basically, for lack of a better term, a cost of doing business. And
Okay.
so, provided that, and this is we'll talk about this later, but provided that you can show that you can produce, all they care about is can you pay your bills. And so what they do is they don't lump your student loan debt the same that they would lump credit card debt. They just put it as kind of a line item for whether or not you can satisfy your debt obligations. And so when we take that into account, all the most important element on whether or not you can secure a loan is, can you produce? Because if you can show that you can produce, then you can qualify for bigger practices, which will then provide more cash flow, which will allow you to get out of debt quicker. And so, unfortunately, far too many doctors are, oh, I've got $300,000 in student loans and I don't want to go into debt more, so I'm going to buy a small practice.
Right.
And that can be financial suicide, because they're so fearful of going into more debt that they're not realizing that the cash flow that they are using, that they're acquiring, isn't enough to satisfy obligations. And so they constantly are borrowing and borrowing and borrowing because they can't catch up. And so one of the things that I always tell my clients is, you should always, at a minimum, be looking for practices where if you produce $500,000, then you should be looking for practices that on a yearly basis collect $500,000. And that's being extremely conservative, because I haven't even taken into account hygiene.
Okay.
And hygiene should be 25% of overall revenue. So really, if you can produce 500,000
as an associate.
As an associate, yeah, thank you. Then you should be looking at practices doing 650.
Okay.
Because there's a hygiene element. And so if I then go, okay, 650, there should be about a 60% overhead. I don't know why I always do this, but I always make the math so difficult for me. But so you got 650, and 40% profitability is where you should be, maybe a little less when you factor in the loan. But so you've got 650, that's putting off cash flow of 260,000 in revenue.
Right.
I mean, of net profit to you, the owner, versus, a practice only doing 300,000, where the net may be 120 if you're lucky. But typically, lower producing practices have higher overhead. So
a lot less room for error.
Exactly. And so, you have to start thinking this way when you're looking at acquiring practices. And don't worry about the fear of going into more debt, because the more cash flow you have, the quicker you actually exit debt.
Well, and one of the parts of this is, so it sounds like your creditworthiness to a bank, if you're talking to a dental specific bank, is not your student loans and your credit score. It's your ability to produce and the practice you're looking at buying. That's more of your credit score, and they're still going to look at your credit worthiness overall.
Yeah, I mean, just some quick and dirty. Most dental lenders want a credit score of 680. They're willing to go down to as much as 660, but they would prefer 680 or above.
Okay.
The biggest negative, honestly, for dental lenders is, are you living within your means?
Okay.
And so they don't want there to be a lot of credit card debt. They don't want there to be,
multiple big auto loans.
Exactly. And I love telling this to people because they get kind of upset sometimes.
Right.
Just because you are a DDS or a DMD does not entitle you to a Mercedes or a BMW.
What?
Yeah. I know, shocking.
I know.
But guess what? The longer you drive that beat up whatever,
2007
better
Corolla,
off you're going to be.
Yeah, no. Absolutely. And it's hard because you've been a student for so long, and now
Right.
you walk out of school and they'll lend you the money for that nice car.
Exactly. I mean, you want to treat yourself. Hey, I just accomplished something, huge. Very few people do this. I want to reward myself. You know, I'll tell you what. Rather than just getting the regular combo meal, go big, get the extras. Because
Supersize me.
that's about what you're entitled to.
Right.
So,
That and a lot of debt.
yeah, exactly.
Um,
So,
what else have you seen hold people up in terms of loans? Is there anything else that lenders will disqualify people from?
well, like I said, it's this living beyond your means thing. And here's something that a lot of people don't realize. The longer you stay as an associate,
Mm-hmm.
the harder banks analyze you. Because if you've been out 10 years, they want to see a pretty substantial nest egg that you've created for yourself
Okay.
versus a girl who's been out for 1 year. They don't need $50,000, $100,000 in the bank. What they need to see is, can she produce? Can he, keep up with the revenues that he's trying to buy? Do they want some money in the bank? Absolutely, but they're willing to be very liberal with that.
If you're a
As long
young
as you can
dentist.
show, yeah, as long as you can show, hey, in the first year, I was saving money.
Right.
So,
So along with that, how long is a year enough for banks to say, okay, you produced this much over the course of a year? That's good enough for us. Or is 2 years better, or is it all the same at that point?
well, I mean, I'm extremely aggressive on practice ownership, and I'm extremely aggressive on practice ownership because I believe that if we don't have a substantial majority of doctors who become owners, then unfortunately, eventually, we're going to go the way of the medical profession, and the industry in general, in terms of individuals, will be making a lot less money.
Hmm.
And so I'm extremely, aggressive on practice ownership for that main reason, but also because it's one of the greatest ways to a pathway of financial freedom that you can have.
Right.
And we can talk about how, down the road. We can talk later about how a dollar as an owner is worth so much more than a dollar as an associate.
I mean, ironically, even with me just starting this website and podcast, and I'm treating it like a business, so we've
Yeah.
set it up as a DBA. I've realized, my trip to Florida with my two dentist friends to hang out with his dentist brother in the Keys, I was talking about my business with them and getting advice and interviewing this dentist about his practice. And I conducted at least 4 hours worth of work while I was there. And correct me if I'm wrong. I've written it all down and I'm going to take it to my CPA, but I can then use that trip as a business expense.
You can, and especially that deep sea fishing
Yes.
expedition where you
Mhm.
really were able to go in depth on those controversial matters. Those are really important.
They are. And the mahi mahi was just a benefit on the side. So,
Exactly.
but it's made me realize that, little trips that I make and purchases that I'm making of equipment and things like that, I can see even running a small podcast website type business already the benefits of ownership. Sorry, 1 second. So I can imagine that would be even more as a practice owner. And the opportunity, and we're not CPAs, but better than I do, the opportunities to save and shelter money from taxes goes much, much further.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Going back to the student loans, yeah, no problem. We're both going off the phones here. Speaking of student loans, one of the things people are worried about is making payments. Now they've got another loan, they've got student loans, but it's ironic because the vast majority of graduating students right now qualify for some sort of income-driven repayment.
Yep.
And while that can accrue more interest long term, and there can be some other things, with forgiveness that and tax burdens with that, but on the whole, that gives people a whole lot of flexibility to make less money for a little period of time, or have fluctuations in their income, and their repayments will adjust. And so this idea that, I won't be able to make my student loan payments if I buy a practice and I have a rough transition, or things get delayed, is actually less of a concern than it should be because of this income driven repayment.
Well, not only that, what you just said right there about, all the fears of transition, that's put out by people who have a vested interest in making you not want to acquire a practice. I mean, if you do things right, and understand, you do things wrong, yeah, you're going to have some mistakes, and you may suffer. But if you do things right, the likelihood of you failing as an owner is about 1%. 1%. That makes dentistry, that makes lending money to dentists the second most profitable, and when I say profitable, I mean secure,
from a banking perspective,
yeah, business loan out there.
Right.
And so, if you can forego all the missteps and do things correctly, you have such a high success rate that, all of these fears about patient attrition and losing money and this and that, none of those come to fruition. First and foremost, you should not be acquiring a practice where you're going to make less money. The exact opposite ends up happening. You end up making more money because, again, as an associate, we're not getting hygiene. And so all of a sudden, if you're producing the same amount as you were as an associate, not only are you seeing more money because of the hygiene, but remember that every dollar you make is stretched about 10 or 15% more.
Right.
And then you have write-offs associated with the business acquisition. So I don't want to say you're swimming in money, but you make a lot more money over the course, not just over the year, but when you extrapolate out over the course of a career. We're not talking tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. We're talking millions of dollars in differential.
Right.
And so that's what all these people, these venture capital firms, these large corporate chains, they don't want you to know that. They don't want you to think long term. They want to put the fear of God into you. You're not going to be able to pay your bills. And the only way to security, and I have huge big quotes around that, is to take a corporate job. Now, you asked earlier, the time frame. How long do I need to be an associate before I buy a practice? I typically say 1 year. Now, obviously, there's wiggle room in there. If you're a star,
right.
I've seen people come right out of dental school. I'm not, even though I'm extremely aggressive, I'm not a proponent of that.
I have one classmate who did it, and that I know of, and she was a star, and she was an oral surgery assistant before she came to dental school, and she was doing, veneer cases during sim course when the rest of us were just trying to, prep basic. You know who you are if you're one of those people.
Right. And so there's always outliers, but I usually say 1 year. And a lot of banks will say 1 year.
Okay.
So, you don't need 5 years. You don't need 7 years. I get so many calls a week. Yeah, I'm not ready. I need another 3 or 4 years because they're fearful of the business element. But the business element, you need to remember, you're buying into a ongoing business. The ongoing business already has a lot of the metrics, a lot of the systems in place. If you're fearful, there are consultants out there who are great at working on leadership, at working on your efficiencies of your systems and everything else, so that first 6 months, you're able to focus on the business aspects, on the clinical aspects, on the politics of the office, on the HR, all those things, and you're learning. Is it a little? I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It's not like it's a walk in the park, but it's something that you have to learn.
Well, and ironically, that's one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast, doing my website, is I feel like as a dentist in the Army, I'm missing out on exposure to business systems and training and insurances and a lot of different things. But I've talked with other dentists who are associates at a different office and that are my classmates that have just been out a year. And sometimes if you're just doing the dentistry, if you're just showing up and seeing the patients that they put on your schedule, you almost aren't getting any more business training in that situation than someone in my situation. So I've realized there are people out there who know how to do these things and are willing to share. And my goal is to be one of those resources that people can use in addition to consultants and other things. But if someone has a question that they want answered and it's a business, how do I run my dental practice in this way? How do I do payroll? And what's the best way to do that? And what are different ways I could do that? And then we'll make a podcast episode about that. Go ahead and give us a call or email us. And we want to know the things that you feel worried about or uncomfortable about. And we'll turn around and hopefully find multiple solutions for that problem. And that's one of our goals. Going into this idea of risk and fear of a startup versus an acquisition versus an associateship, some people think it's less risky to be in an associateship. And you've mentioned before that that's not necessarily true. And you mentioned earlier that once you're in a good position as an owner doc, your chance of failure are close to 1%. So how is it risky to be an associate?
Well, do you control your own future? And the answer is no. You have other people controlling you, controlling your schedule, controlling your compensation, controlling your patient flow. You are a cog in the machine as opposed to being the one pulling the levers. And that's okay for some people. But the problem is we have way too many people who think that they are cogs when in fact they are the ones, or should be the ones, pulling the levers. And so, the riskiest thing that you can do in life is to work for somebody else. I mean, all you have to do is open up the paper every day, see who's laying off whom,
right.
and the heads of the companies are rarely the ones getting laid off.
Yeah.
And so, I believe that as professionals, we should control our own destiny, not somebody that knows nothing about my practice if I'm in a corporate chain, not an owner who is always going to have themselves first in terms of patient flow, the procedure mix, everything else.
Right.
It's me. I want to control my destiny, and I want to sink or I want to swim based upon my own talents. And I want those talents to continually being pushed and pulled and growing and failing and all of these things so that a year from now, I'm a better doctor than I was. I'm a better business person than I was. I'm a better human than I was because I'm going through all of these issues and I'm learning on a daily basis. So I believe, and I'm always willing to listen, but I believe that the riskiest thing you can do as a doctor is to be a long-term associate.
More of that after the break, but first, a word from our sponsor. Okay, now that you've realized that your neck hurts not because of the weight of your loops or the angle of declination, that it hurts because you're looking over your telescopes, the next part that should frustrate you about your current pair of loops is that there's this wasted space between the bottom of the frame and where it's comfortable to look down. So I want you to look down when you're wearing your loops. So look below the loops, below the frame. And if you look down really far, like as far as you can without moving your head, eventually that's strained, that's uncomfortable. You can't have the loops that far down. You can't hold that for a while. There's this whole zone of comfortable space between the bottom of the frames and where the loops could be placed that's wasted because of your current frame. Q Optics has designed not only a new frame, but also a way of measuring the space of your face. They actually take like a face bow of you and take a picture of it and put it in the computer. There's this little contraption with green dots that you wear on a pair of glasses, and they take a photo from the front and a photo from the side. And they've got some fancy names for it, but essentially they're doing a map of your face, a 3D map of your face, and maximizing the amount of frame that can dip down and they can put loops in. Why wouldn't you maximize that for every single person? Well, it's easy. It's easier to just buy a bunch of preset frames than it is to make custom frames for everybody. So if you're interested in maximizing the real estate that you have available, you can send an email to sales@qoptics.com with the promo code SP16 for $100 off a pair of loops or $300 off of a loop and light combo. It's time for you to stop wasting all that space. So one more area that I wanted to talk about with holding people back from practice ownership, and you've talked about this before, but this idea of work-life balance, especially if you happen to be a female dentist who wants to start a family, maybe wants to take time off to start that family at some point, and is afraid.
I'm wondering when you're going to get to that.
And is afraid, that it's easier to have a baby as an associate than it is as a practice owner. What would you say to that person and say that, is that a reason to delay practice ownership?
Heck no, it's not.
Okay.
And here's the thing, and all. Well, I almost broke out of Beyonce for a second, but all of the female doctors, please listen to this carefully, okay? You are, and I don't want to sugarcoat this at all, but you are the prey that corporate dentistry wants to feed upon. Because, and by the way, never trust anybody in this industry, including myself. So I want you to look this up. The ADA published a report called, and I always mess up the name, Industry in Transition or something like that.
Okay.
It came out 2 or 3 years ago. You can go to ada.org and research, but it basically said that females are half as likely as their male counterparts to want to acquire a dental practice. They are twice as likely to be long-term career associates. And because they now are more than 50% of the graduating class, this is a significant shift. And therefore, if those numbers do not get closer to the male counterparts, I am telling you this right now, and I don't think I need to be a prophet to say this, this industry will not survive under its current state. It will go the way of the medical profession because women are being told you can't have it both ways. You can't be a business owner and a mom. It's just, you can't do it. Or there's the only security you will have is being an associate. Or, you have too much debt. This is the way you have to go. Have your kids, and then maybe you can buy a practice. Well, that's 10 years later, and I think all of us can probably agree that in our 30s, we're a lot more conservative than we were in our 20s.
Right.
And we are more risk averse in our 30s and 40s than we were in our 20s.
For sure.
And so it's all part of this, PR campaign, this indoctrination of and specifically targeted females that, we're here to help you. We want your best interest. And the exact opposite is true. Um, my most successful clients are female partnerships
Mm.
because they understand that partnerships are about shared sacrifice, shared reward. And when I say success, I'm not talking money. I'm talking about quality of life, their families, how they
Happiness.
feel about themselves, how they feel about the profession, all of these other, extra issues that go into who we are as an individual. And so what I will tell specifically, and to a slightly lesser extent, that includes all you millennials out there listening. You all, for some reason, are risk averse. And I want to slap you guys around a little bit because
Good.
you guys, you don't want, you believe all of these things that you're being told, and a lot of it's not true. And so you have to, in order to protect yourself, you have to uh, take the risk of being an owner and understand that the risk isn't in being an owner. The risk is not taking the risk of becoming an owner.
Mm.
Because if solo practice ownership continues to decline, we will eventually get to what I term critical mass. And the critical mass is we as an industry cannot go back. And corporate dentistry, venture capital takes over this industry. And what do you think happens when Wall Street takes over an industry? Do you think wages go up or wages go down?
Optometry moves inside Walmart.
Optometry moves in. By the way, dentistry is moving inside of Walmart.
I've heard that's happening, and I'm choosing not to believe it. I'm putting my head in the sand.
Well, the good news is they're not doing too well.
Good.
But the bad news is yes,
It's
this
happening.
industry, it's happening. And so we as a profession need to figure out what the heck we want to do.
Okay. So I'm going to take this as a segue then. We've already kind of developed a little bit of a plan of graduation to practice ownership. And I kind of want to dive a little bit more into the details and recap and summarize and figure out, okay, step by step, here is a pathway that can get you from I'm in so much debt, I'm a new grad, I'm unsure of everything, to having the experience, getting the financing, finding the practice, and making it happen. So you said that you need to find a good associateship. And I can't remember if you've said it here or if you've said it in the other podcast. It's all a blur at this point. But you've said that a practice needs to be at least $900,000 of production for an associate to come in and there to be enough production for both the owner doc and the associate. Do you still stand by that? 900,000 is a good benchmark of.
Not 900,000 to $1 million for a solo practice.
Okay.
And so, and again, remember, we have to factor in hygiene. So of that $1 million, 250,000 should be hygiene. And so now we only have $750,000 in doctor production. So if we start playing around with those numbers too much and drop it down to 700, there's just not enough revenue. Now, I don't want it to be a constant $1 million. I want it to be trending upwards, with good new patient flow and things like that. But yes, as an associate, you need to take control of your own destiny. And you need to be asking questions like, how much are your yearly revenues? I mean, I would say 9 out of 10 doctors never ask that. Now, that's in my mind. That's not an actual stat.
Sure.
But the vast majority of doctors never ask that when they're going in to try to get a job.
So what would you say? You'd say, what has been your revenue for the last 3 years?
What has been your revenue for the last 3 years? What is your new patient flow?
Okay.
Another thing, how many operatories do you have? Because if they only have 4 operatories, well, only one of you is going to be able to work. Otherwise, neither one of you are going to be efficient.
Right. You'd have to be doing off days of you're working these days and I'm working those days.
Exactly. So we want to know that. Now, I will tell you that for corporate dentistry, I want you, if you're going to go corporate dentistry, I want you to use and abuse them as much as possible in that 1 year, because it's a great way of learning hand speed, of becoming efficient in procedures, because they are just going to throw patients at you left and right. So I don't necessarily say corporate dentistry is bad as long as you use it for a very short period of time.
Right.
You know, it's kind of like chemotherapy. You don't want to use chemotherapy your entire life.
Right.
But if we're dealing with cancer,
You got to do
use
it.
it for a period of time.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that they're cancer, but anyways, so I mean, going to work for corporate dental for 1 year isn't a bad idea. I'm not saying don't do that. In fact, I would say go for it, but understand they are going to try to lock you down with golden handcuffs.
Right.
So use them, abuse them, try to understand systems, try to understand the non-clinical while you're there, because a lot of corporate chains are very good at the non-clinical aspects. Ask questions. Make sure, and this is going to kind of go hand in hand with practice ownership, but make sure you are always entitled to your production reports.
Okay. I was just going to ask that. How do you prove that you produced this, and how much should you be producing? And you mentioned it before, but go ahead.
Yeah, make sure you always have access to your production reports, because that's what the banks are going to want to see.
Okay.
It's all wonderful if you say that you produce $700,000, but if you can't show that you can produce $700,000, banks aren't going to believe you.
Right.
So we always, no matter if we're in a solo practice, in a corporate chain, in a group practice, wherever, we want the ability to be able to see those production reports. That goes hand in hand with how you deal with your compensation. You'd never want your compensation to be just a per diem or just percentage of collections. Obviously, understand I'm saying you never. Obviously, there's wiggle room here, but the best type of compensation model is something where you're incentivizing both parties. And so, I like the greater of language. The greater of, say, $500 per day or 30% of adjusted production.
Okay.
Front end, the owner is incentivized to give you patience so that he or she doesn't lose money.
Right. Paying $500 a day for you to do nothing.
Exactly. In the back end, you're incentivized to work harder because you're going to make more money. And so if we are incentivizing both parties, then we're going to be getting guaranteed production numbers of around $2,000 a day. $2,000 a day times 5 is 10,000, times 4 is 40,000, times 12 is 480,000. Lo and behold, we now can qualify for a practice doing $600,000, $700,000.
Okay, so you'd want to aim for $2,000 a day, at least $40,000 a month, to be able to then move on and qualify for a loan.
Right, because remember, we have to view our career as stepping stones. And if we falter on that first stepping stone, it's going to be harder to get to that second one.
Right.
And so, and just let's just use numbers real quick. So if I'm trying to make the numbers easier. So let's say you're a rock star and you don't think that this stuff applies to you.
Okay.
And you're $1 million producer. Obviously, if you're a $500,000 producer, then just divide by 2. And you're working in, as a corporate dentist or in a practice. Well, one, you're going to be treated as an employee. So you are going to be taxed at the highest rate possible as an employee. Okay, so that's number one.
Is it like 12.5 or 15% extra self-employment, 1099 employee?
Well, that's if you're an independent contractor.
Okay, so, sorry, I'll take that back.
No, it's okay. No, it's a great question because that's another issue. But most corporate chains are going to treat you as an employee, and they're going to pay you between 25 and 28%. But let's just go crazy and say that somehow you negotiated 30%, which you're probably not going to be able to do. But let's err on the side of making corporate dentistry look amazing.
Which usually isn't the goal, but but
Right,
continue.
exactly. So I'm just trying to bust through all the myths. So we're $1 million producer, and we are taking home $300,000 a year,
Right.
which is great. I mean,
That's good
good
money.
job, fabulous.
That's awesome.
The problem is you're paying the highest tax possible on that 300,000 because you don't have write-offs.
Okay.
Okay, so that's number one. Number two, same production, $1 million in revenue, but now I'm a practice owner. Okay,
Okay.
so now I have practice ownership, which now entitles me to hygiene. So my 1 million, and I'm going to be conservative on this, my 1 million now turns into 1,250,000.
Okay.
So assuming normal overhead of 60%,
Mm-hmm.
you take that, you multiply that by zero point 0.4, so 1,250,000, multiply that by 0.4, my
Just
revenue,
south of 500,000.
yeah, it's 500,000 exactly. So it's 500,000 as opposed to 300,000. Same doctor production
Right.
in both places, but now I've made $200,000 more,
And
and I get better tax treatment.
okay.
Because really, when you factor this in, I'm going to have a lot of write-offs, and conservatively, my dollar will stretch 10% more.
Right.
So not only did I make 200 grand more, but I made an additional 50 grand just being an owner, an entity, which gives favorable tax treatment. So I've
Almost doubled.
almost doubled, and I probably, if I'm being fair to practice ownership, I probably have doubled
Right.
my income.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. I love that you've laid it out. Simple numbers. It just makes sense.
But here's the beauty. So then you extrapolate that over 20 years. Okay?
Right.
So now we're talking millions, and at the end of the day, I have an asset that I can sell. So it's not just 250,000 a year times 20, which that's $5 million
Right.
differential.
You're not even talking about investing any of that in compound interest and
Exactly. And now you know why venture capital wants to come into dentistry.
right.
So
We're leaving a lot on the table.
exactly. So you take all of that, and like you just said, compounding interest and all these other things. But then at the end of the day, I get to sell my practice.
Right.
Probably $1 million or something like that. So not only are we talking 5 million, we're talking compound interest. We're talking the sale of an asset down the road. You're probably looking at a differential of $8 to $10 million.
And not to mention the control and the, having your own thing all along the way, as opposed to being owned by someone else or working for someone else.
Exactly. And so that's what I try to, whenever I'm speaking at dental schools, whenever I'm talking to young dentists, that's why I'm trying to beat into them. Do not believe what you are necessarily being told. You need to mistrust everybody and do your own research on this.
Right.
Because you're going to find out that when you start to delve into these issues, it's like night and day.
So,
go ahead.
Oh no, and this is awesome because this is exactly what I wanted to hear. Why should someone change their thinking if they think, oh, I'm just going to be an associate, and the numbers alone clarify the issue.
Well, real quick, getting back to the female issue. Owning your own business allows you the additional freedom to have the ability to have kids, still make an income. Because remember, as a dentist, being an associate, you're not getting income when you are on maternity leave.
Right.
And the best thing for if you're a single mom, if you're married, whatever, the best thing to be is an owner of a business, and you are able to take your kids to school because you can control your own schedule. You can get the sports schedule at the beginning of the season and plan accordingly. I mean, I love my kids go to a private school, and there's a lot of female doctors that female dentists that are a part of the school, and they are the ones that get to go on the field trips. They are the ones that get to help out in the class when they want. They are the ones that get to go to the sports activities, and every single one of those females own their own practice.
Well, thank you so much. We'll have to set up another time. This has been awesome, and I know this. You've got a lot of other things going on, a lot of clients to take care of. So I appreciate you setting aside this time to talk with a guy who's 5 years out from even buying anything.
Well, hey, I've been keeping abreast of your situation from afar because you were definitely a shining star even back in dental school.
Oh, I don't know about that, but thank you.
I think a lot of us have great expectations for you.
Well, we'll see, and hopefully we can bring value to other people. That's the goal.
Well, absolutely. We want to avoid people making missteps that are going to either derail or, kind of change the trajectory of their career. I want people to be successful. I want this industry to continue to be independent. I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say that I'm probably the number one enemy of corporate dentistry.
Right.
But is there a place for them? Yes. But as a profession, as every individual listening to this, you also have a duty to your profession. And that duty is to be knowledgeable and to be understanding some of these issues that, let's be honest, you didn't go to school for.
No.
But you need to commit to understanding the business side of dentistry, because that is your, and forgive me for saying the strong word, but that ignorance is what people prey upon.
Well, and I'm all in, and my goal is to bring as many others with me. So hopefully we can make it happen. Thank you so much for your time and for the fun, and we'll figure out another time to talk a little more.
All right, Rich. Thank you, sir.
Awesome. Talk to you later, Jason.
All right, bye.
Bye. The two things that stood out to me the most are one, this idea of hygiene plus tax benefits equals almost double income for the same production. And the second is that the risk of failure of a dental practice is less than 1%, and how that is so different than almost every other industry. We're going to bring on a few more guests and get their perspective on who should and shouldn't own a dental practice and how to know which camp you fall in over the next couple days. If this was at all helpful for you, please take a moment right now, whatever you're doing, unless you're driving, stop and leave us a review on iTunes or whatever app you're using right now. Thank you to those who have left reviews. Dr. Stott, Mind737, I think that's Yehuda, Dentist, Student Dentist, Skeptic Allen, Arlo04, I don't know who that guy is, but everyone, thank you so much for your reviews online. This has been the Shared Practices Podcast.